Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So in this video what I'd like to do is actually show you guys how you can efficiently make a landscape for your scenario. So as you might know, in Magic Terrace Resort I actually made an entire scenario with landscape in it, with forests and rivers and a few lakes and things like that, which really helped me to develop Magic Terrace further because I had something to work with and to kind of work around as well. So that's what I'll be showing you how to do that in this video. Now of course if you're making a scenario, you of course open up the scenario editor, and now you would like to obviously select all the scenery objects that you want. Now I already know what objects I want, so I'll be loading my workbench that I'll make available for download in the description below. And this will be the most recent workbench that I use for Magic Terrace myself, so that you have a good solid base with objects to work with. And of course you can edit that to add the objects that you like personally as well. So I'm gonna load this up, and as you can see I already shrunk down the map size to 64 by 64. Just as a small map size, so I can actually show you guys how to do this. Now, first of all, what I usually like to start with is with some of the major features. So if I have a beach or a river running through my map, I obviously want to make sure that I do that first, so I kind of know where it would be or where it would run. So for this video, let's imagine that this little piece of land is right next to a lake. So what I would then do is just come in. Let's set that to 16 or something, and just lower some land. And as you can see, I'm using the mountain tool here to make sure that the edges of the lake are nicely sloped already for me, which will save me a lot of time in a very near future. Alright, so now that we have the lake planned out and we kind of know where we would like to place that, we can add some other features to the terrain as well. Because just having a flat map isn't very inspiring. It's not really going to help us to build around some nice challenges to give us along the way when we're actually building a park. And that's, I think, the main thing that we want to keep in mind when we're building a scenario is that you're basically building all these landscape things, not only because it looks nice, but also because it will actually fuel your creativity once you start building. But we do have to keep in mind that we have to build a park here as well. So it wouldn't be a very wise idea for me to build a giant mountain in the middle of this map, because then there's very little space for me to build the park on. However, if the idea for your scenario is actually that it is on a mountain, then of course you would want a mountain in the middle of your map, because then you can actually build a theme park on that. However, for this map I'm just going with some very gradual hills, just some very gradual height differences basically. And again, we can kind of start planning that out using the mountain tool and just making some very gradual mountains here and there. Right now, the terrain that I have over here is very blocky, so we have very straight angles that go around. And the problem with that is that it doesn't look very natural. It just looks like maybe some people have been digging some sand here in a very grid-like pattern. And it's not really helping the looks of this scenario. So instead, what you want to try and do is actually try to kinda smooth it out a bit. Make it a bit curvy. Now, while you're doing that, you might run into another issue that I usually try to prevent. I'll show you in a second what I mean. So you can just lower a few bits and make a lot of other bits, maybe just a little bit lower, just so you have a very nice and gradual curve to it. So now, if I were to draw a line on the edge of this little hill over here, it is actually kind of smooth, but not so smooth that it makes a perfect circle, because in nature, of course, you won't find perfect circles, so it is a bit jagged, and that's fine. It's fine to be a bit more rough in some places and a bit more smooth in other places, really. Now, one thing to really keep in mind while you're doing that is you want to try and avoid diagonals as much as you can. Right, so if I really wanted to, I could just go in and make this very, very diagonal based. So we have a lot of diagonal terrain going on. There's a very big problem with this. Now, when you're building your park and you're placing down paths, you might know that, well, you can't actually place paths on these diagonal pieces. Of course, you can build around that, just working like this, but I usually don't really like that because it doesn't look very nice. So instead, you want the slopes to be on the grid, just like that. Because now you can actually build on it and use it efficiently as well. When you have a slope that's a bit longer than your usual one tail or two tails, it might be nice to start adding a bit more detail to that slope. So the way we can do that is, for example, over here, we can start working on the corners and kind of dip it down in a few places, just like that. We can do the same on the other level as well. Again though, there's one thing you want to keep in mind, and that's the places where you can build paths. This is perfect, because here we have a place where we can build a path. We can also build one here. If we want, we will be able to connect it up to here. So this isn't too bad. This is a pretty from a gameplay perspective, this is a really good location, because it really, you know, restricts the player from placing paths in certain places, but it still allows them to play on this little area. So that's good. That's what you want to keep in mind. The same goes over here. We can place a path over here still. We can place one over here. But we do have a bit more detail going on. I think that's kind of nice. Actually, I don't like that these bits are exactly the same. Try to prevent areas that are exactly the same next to each other, because it will start looking, I don't know, kind of man-made. We can dip this down just a little bit. Just like that. Already makes it better. There you go. I think that works. Now, if you continue doing this to the rest of the area, you can really start to see your terrain taking shape. So let's do that. So the two main ways that we can work these areas is by either chipping away from a corner, just like that, or by filling in a corner. So let's actually move this back to a corner. There you go. And that's by just adding some hills to the corner. That's the two main ways that I like to work on an area for a little hill like this. Makes it pretty nice and efficient. Now, next up, we still have our river. Now, with, well, it's actually, I think it's more like a lake. So let's actually work on the lake now. Because when there's water involved, there's something else to keep in mind. Now, let's actually move over to this area, which has a little place that's a bit lower to the ground. So I can actually show you what you want to do with water. Now, let's actually thin this out just a little bit. There you go. Now with water, what you might be used to is by just placing the water, just like that, all the way up to the edge. Now, this works for some areas, but in general, it doesn't look very nice if you fill up the water right to the edge of the landscape. Instead, what you want to try and do is, let me just remove this water and go back in with the mountain tool. Just make it a little bit lower, just like that. You have to be careful though, because this area is very, very thin. But once I've done that, there you go. If we now fill it up by just a single unit, just like that, you can see that we have a little buffer on the edge, and that allows us to later on just place some bushes and things there, just to make it look nice. And it's a little less abrupt. It doesn't just suddenly start with water. Now, keep in mind though, in some areas this might work. Especially if you plan on adding a lot of plants, just like so, then it might actually work to just not have that slope there. But in general, I would try to keep that slope there because it's gonna be pretty difficult to make that look nice if you don't. So let's actually apply that on our lake here as well. So again, we're just gonna smooth out the terrain, but instead of adding that extra step where we add some additional details like we did over here, we're not gonna do that on the water edge. So of course we could make this a bit smoother looking if we were to dip down. Whoop, I'm not using the mountain tool here. Well, let's redo that. There you go. So if we were to dip these sections down, it might actually look a little bit smoother, but since we have the water there, it isn't always gonna work. Now, I would like to use these places like this in my own scenario, but if I do so, I always fill them up with bushes just to make them look nice. But for the sake of this tutorial, let's keep it simple and actually try to prevent that as much as we can. Now, next up, you can already start doing some terrain painting. Of course, now the entire area is just grass. Maybe in your case, it might be a desert or something else. But there are already some details that we can add to the terrain paint. And later we're gonna expand upon that once we start with vegetation as well. Now inside of the water, we might want a different texture than the grass. So I'm just going for this brown stone. With that out of the way, we can now also do the other terrain. Generally, when I have a very gradual slope like over here, I wouldn't really do anything with it. I'll just keep that grass or keep it sand or whatever you're working with. But once we get a little bit steeper, like over here, we're going up multiple tiles in a very short section, it can be nice to add some extra texture. Now you can do this with rocks, you can do this with the dirt, you can do this with the muddy grass texture, just what you like, you can basically use. But for this one I'm going to be using the dirt for the sides. I'm just gonna paint the sides, and in the places where it starts getting more gradual again, I'm just gonna stop, I'm just gonna leave it be. I think this looks pretty nice, just the way it is. So as you can see, it's really quite simple to do this. Now, our next step is gonna be vegetation. What I like to do, because I don't know a whole lot about plants, is to just look up a type of forest that I want and kind of look for the trees that look similar to it. Now, once we have made our selection of trees, what I generally like to do is start with our biggest tree. Let's place 2 down. Now, make sure that you don't place them next to each other, because it's going to be very obvious that it is the exact same tree. So make sure it's a bit different. Just to break it up. Go with your second largest tree and kind of work your way down from there. Now that's it for just the trees, but the thing that really makes this look a lot better is gonna be the bushes. So what I recommend doing is disabling zero clearance. That allows you to build inside of other trees. That allows you to just place these bushes right at the edge of a tree. But what we kind of are trying to go for is to kind of build up the forest. So we start really low with some bushes, then the smaller trees, some slightly larger trees, and then in the center the really large trees. So you have a really nice build-up. And now what this build-up also allows you to do is make the forest look very dense, even if it has a lot of empty patches. I think that looks pretty nice. Now, you might think, well, Ollie414, that's a lot of work for such a small area. I have this entire map to fill. And this map is already quite small, it's only 64 by 64, but what if I have a mega park to work with? Well, let me tell you, here's the next trick. So, once you've built a few of those sections just like that, you can actually copy that section around and paste it. But to actually place some rides here, we need to do something. To build rides, we're gonna have to open this park up. So technically we're now playing the scenario, but basically what that allows us to do is place rides and things like that as well. Because we're gonna need that to copy these sections around. Now, to copy a section, make sure you have clearance checks disabled. I like to use the car ride for this. Then I'm just gonna build a ride right through my forest. With that, I'm making sure that I'm basically visiting every tile or the tile next to the tiles where my forest is. So I can leave one tile space between the track. But to get the best coverage, I do need to make sure that I'm basically touching all the trees in this forest. Go to this icon and save the track with scenery. Select nearby scenery and there you go. Now I can delete the ride. And what we can now do is open the card ride, and here you see all my blueprints that I'm using. So here's the one I just created. You can just place that right next to it, delete the ride, go away. Do it again. Another area, maybe over here. There you go, boom, done. Next one. And of course you want to make sure that you have different ones as well. So here's one that I created for Magic Towers that's a bit larger. So once you put multiple next to each other, you'll be able to combine them if you want. And you can fill your entire map up just like that. And it will look very natural. Now, of course, once you've played those, you have to make sure that, again, you add the terrain paint that you want to it, because that won't be saved along with the blueprint. You have to do that yourself. But you can kind of fill up your map just like that. Now, when doing that, make sure that you have some areas left in between the forest. Don't make your entire map fill with forest. But that's kind of how you can get going to make a very nice looking scenario. Anyways though, that's about it for this video. I hope you guys were able to learn something from this. If you like this video, make sure to give a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.